Hey guys, in these examples, we're going to be looking over parallel and perpendicular lines and their slopes. So just a refresher, parallel lines, they never intersect. So they look like this on the graph. Think like train tracks. They're never ever going to cross. Perpendicular lines, they intersect and form a right angle. So something like this. Now what you need to know about their slopes is parallel lines have the same slope. So 2 equals 2, 1/2 equals 1/2. They're the same. Perpendicular lines have negative reciprocal slopes. So you change the sign and then you flip it. So 3/4 and -3/4. So we took it, we flipped it, and we changed the sign. 3 and -1/3. When it's a whole number, you just put it over a 1. Then you flip it, and of course change their sign. And what you also need to know is 0 and undefined will always be perpendicular because one of these is crossing through the x-axis, one is crossing through the y-axis. So let's look at some actual examples. And these problems right here, so they give us one line and 2 points on that line and another line and another 2 points. We have to find the slope for each line and then figure out if they're opposite reciprocals or the same. Keep in mind, the formula to find a slope is this, but you should have this memorized by now. Okay, so I'm gonna go through and label this x1, y1, x2, y2. We're just gonna plug it in. So AB is gonna equal 6 minus 3 over 2 minus a -2 becomes +2. 6 minus 3 is 3. 2 plus 2 is 4. So the slope of AB is 3/4. Now we're gonna find the slope of line CD. Go through and label them again. CD equals 3 minus 0 over 3 minus a -1 becomes +1. 3 minus 0 is 3. 3 plus 1 is 4. 3/4 does equal 3/4. So these two are their parallel lines. Okay, example number 2, same thing. We're just going to find the slope of each line. Go through and label these. Okay, so AB is going to be 4 minus 3 over -1 minus 2. 4 minus 3 is 1. 1. -1 minus 2 is -3. So the slope of AB is -1/3. Now CD is going to be 6 minus 3 over -4 minus a -1. a -5, which becomes +5. 6 minus 3 is 3. -4 plus 5 is 1. 3 over 1, of course, simplifies to 3. So we're left with -1/3 and 3, and these are going to be perpendicular because -1/3 and 3 are opposite reciprocals. Let's look at one more example like this. Same thing for every problem. We're always going to go through and label them. Okay. So for AB, it's going to be 6 minus 8 over 2 minus a -1 becomes a +1. 6 minus 8 is -2. 2 plus 1 is 3. So the slope of AB is -2/3. Now we're going to find CD. 3 minus 2 over 3 minus a -1 becomes +1. 3 minus 2 is 1. 3 plus 1 is 4. So if you look at these two slopes, we have -2/3 and 1/4. So they're neither the same or negative reciprocals. So these lines are going to be neither. It is okay to get neither as an option. Okay? So sometimes for the questions, they'll give you ones like these where you actually have to find the slope yourself, or they'll give it to you in an equation and you'll have to identify the slope. Well, we know if y is by itself, then it's in slope-intercept form, and your slope is always what's attached to the x. So for these two, the slope on both of these is 7, and if they're the same, we know they're parallel. Number 5, of course, once again, the slope's always attached to x. We have -1/3 and 1/3. So this is what gets a lot of people, because a lot of people will say, oh, well, they're opposite reciprocals. No, they do have the opposite signs, but they're the same. They're both 1/3, so this one's just going to be neither. So keep in mind, in order for it to be an opposite reciprocal, you have to actually flip it and then change the sign. Number 6, anytime it's y equals something and x equals something, it's going to be perpendicular. And why that is, and I'll show you a little example. It's easiest to see it when you just draw it out. So here's a graph. So y equals +6. We'll say it's somewhere up here. It'd cross about there. And then x equals -1 would cross somewhere about here. So see how those would give you that perfect right angle right there. That way, these are neither. And then the last example that you could possibly run into is when they give it to you in standard form. So first you're gonna have to get y by itself first before we can identify the slope. So just start by just getting y by itself. So we're gonna subtract 3x from both sides. And then we need positive y, so we're gonna divide everything by a -1. We get y equals 3x minus 2. Same thing over here, we're just gonna get y by itself. We're gonna subtract 12x from both sides. And then divide by a -4. We get y equals 3x minus 1. So this one, once again, we only care about what's attached to the x. Those are the same, so these are going to be parallel. So one more time, you cannot compare slope when they're in standard form. You have to get y by itself first before you can identify your slope. Because if you just went up here and said, oh, well, it's whatever's attached to x, you would have gotten that one is 3 and one is 12, and you would have said that's neither. So this one would have been wrong because these are parallel lines.